Struggling immigrant nurse saves stab billionaire. What happens next is unbelievable. The blood on Maria's hands was warm and fresh, but it wasn't from a patient on a hospital gurney. It came from a dying woman in a dark alley, just minutes before sunrise, on a street where coffee shops were opening and no one noticed the horror unfolding in the shadows. What began as a simple act of kindness would soon unravel into a national scandal, a dangerous conspiracy, and a reward for kindness that no one, especially not a struggling immigrant nurse, could have expected. Maria Reyes didn't have the luxury of rest. As a Filipino nurse in America, every morning began with chaos, medications, schedules, uniforms still damp from last night's laundry. She kissed her son Andre's burning forehead, murmured a prayer in Tagalog, and slipped quietly out of their one-bedroom apartment, her breath fogging in the cold air. Andre's fever hadn't broken. Rent was overdue. Her double shift at St. Luke's Medical Center promised more stress, more side eyes from colleagues who questioned her competence simply because her license had been earned overseas. But Maria walked on, her tired feet carrying more than just her body. They carried responsibility, sacrifice, and an unshakable resolve to create a better life. As rain began to fall, soft and steady, she pulled her coat tighter and quickened her steps through the quiet Chicago street. Neon signs flickered to life. Trash bins lined the sidewalk. Somewhere, a delivery truck beeped in reverse. Then she heard it. A faint, choked cry. Maria stopped. It came from an alley ahead, wedged between a boarded-up pawn shop and a diner kitchen door propped open with a mop. Most people would have walked past. But Maria wasn't most people. She had built her life on compassion. Kindness was her instinct, even when it cost her. She turned into the alley. A woman, elderly, pale, and bleeding, lay crumpled against the wall, her clothes soaked with rain and crimson. A knife wound in her abdomen spilled dark blood onto the cracked concrete. Maria's nurse instincts kicked in. She dropped to her knees. "I'm a nurse. Stay with me." She pressed her scarf against the wound, applying pressure. The woman moaned, her fingers twitching weakly. "What's your name?" Maria asked, her voice urgent but soft. The woman blinked slowly. My son. Tell him." "Tell him what?" The woman coughed, her eyes rolling back. Her breath stuttered in her chest. Maria leaned in, speaking softly to keep her awake. "You're going to be okay. Help is coming." Sirens echoed from the next block. Blue lights flickered off metal trash cans. Maria looked up, heart pounding. In that moment, she knew what she had to do. If the police saw her like this, a brown woman crouched over a bleeding white woman in a back alley, it could be dangerous. She gently lowered the woman's head to the ground. But before she stood, the woman reached out with trembling fingers and slipped a folded, blood-speckled piece of paper into Maria's palm. "Tell him the truth," she whispered. Then the sirens screamed closer. Maria backed away and disappeared into the crowd just as paramedics rushed in. Her heart thundered in her chest. She never got the woman's name. She only knew she had done what was right. Because sometimes, kindness is its own reward, even if the world never knows you showed it. But fate had other plans. By the time she arrived at the hospital, Maria had scrubbed the blood from her hands in a gas station bathroom. Her soaked scrubs clung to her skin as she rushed into St. Luke's through the staff entrance. No one noticed, or so she thought. Later that afternoon, as she finished changing a dressing on a post-op patient, a message rang out over the intercom. "Maria Reyes, report to administration." Her stomach sank. Was she being written up for being late? She'd had enough warnings. In the administrator's office, two men in dark suits stood waiting. "Maria Reyes," one asked. "You were near Halsted Street this morning?" Maria froze. "Yes." "Why? You helped a woman who was stabbed?" I found her. I stopped the bleeding. That's all." The second man leaned forward. "That woman was Eleanor Hargrove. Billionaire. She's been missing for 3 years." Maria blinked. Her breath caught. "You didn't just save a woman. You saved a national figure. A mother. A legacy. There will be a reward for your kindness, Ms. Reyes." But Maria barely heard them. Her fingers drifted to her coat pocket. She still hadn't looked at the note the woman gave her. Now, as she stood in the sterile office under flickering fluorescent lights, surrounded by government agents and administrative suspicion, Maria realized her life was about to change. Because sometimes kindness doesn't just save a life, it opens the door to secrets the powerful would kill to bury. She had saved a billionaire's life, yet she walked the hospital halls like a ghost, unseen, unpraised, and disrespected. The blood was gone from her hands, But the weight of that moment still clung to Maria Reyes like a second skin. She didn't expect glory. She didn't want headlines. But as the whispers grew louder in the break room and the side-eyes sharpened in the nurse's station, she began to realize that in America, even kindness came with a cost. Hours had passed since the two suited men had identified the bleeding woman in the alley as Eleanor Hargrove, one of the wealthiest women in the country, stabbed and left for dead, only to be saved by an undocumented act of compassion from a Filipino immigrant nurse. Maria had returned to her ward in silence. No press, no parade, just more shifts, more patience, and more tension. At St. Luke's Medical Center, the white halls glistened with sterility, but underneath the surface, they dripped with judgment. Maria had grown used to it. The way some American nurses questioned her training, how they asked if she had practiced real medicine in the Philippines, how patients sometimes flinched at her accent or requested someone local. But today, the air was different. Laura Simmons, the head nurse, stood near the nurse's station pretending not to look at her. Her eyes narrowed with curiosity and something colder. Nearby, another nurse muttered under her breath, "Guess she's aiming for a green card with that little hero stunt." Maria felt the sting but said nothing. She tucked her hair behind her ear, checked the charts, and kept walking. Down the hallway, in room 212, a post-surgical patient refused her care. "I want someone who understands me," the elderly man snapped. Not one of them. It wasn't the first time, but it felt heavier today. She returned to the break room, opened her locker. There, taped above her spare shoes, was Andre's drawing, a stick figure version of her with angel wings. Written in shaky crayon letters, "My mom helps people." It reminded her of who she was. A single mom fighting to survive, not just for herself but for her son. A woman whose kindness had saved a life. A nurse who had saved a billionaire, even if no one would say it out loud. Later that afternoon, she was summoned again to admin. This time, she expected accusations. She braced herself. Instead, the door opened to a different kind of silence. Seated at the conference table were two more suited men, and in the center, holding a silk scarf over her healing wound, was Eleanor Hargrove herself. The color had returned to the older woman's face, but her eyes held the same intensity Maria remembered from the alley. "You," Eleanor said softly. "You didn't run for the cameras. You didn't take credit. You simply helped. That is rare." Maria looked to the men beside her. Federal agents. They gave no nod of approval, no smile, only watched. "I needed to see you again," Eleanor continued. "To thank you. And to warn you." Maria's breath caught. "Warn me." Eleanor's hand trembled as she slid a small envelope across the table. "There are people who wanted me dead. They know someone stopped them. If they learn it was you, you'll be in danger." Maria didn't move. Her heart thudded. "I thought it was just a robbery." "It wasn't," Eleanor said. "It was a message. One I refused to receive." She looked down, her voice breaking. "My son will come looking for you." Maria stared at her. "Daniel Hargrove?" Eleanor nodded. "He doesn't trust easily. He trusts even less when there's a risk to the family's empire." The room chilled. Before Maria could speak, Eleanor leaned in, eyes sharp again. "But I believe in rewarding kindness, not punishing it." She looked to the agents. "Make sure she's protected." Maria left the meeting dazed, the envelope tucked tightly in her coat. Inside were two things, a contact card for a security firm and a handwritten note that simply read, "Don't trust anyone inside the hospital. They're watching you." Her legs carried her back to the nursing floor, but her mind raced. Who was watching? What had she been pulled into? The break room now felt like a cage. The hospital, a stage set for betrayal. But Maria knew one thing for sure. Her act of kindness in the alley was no accident. It was a turning point, and whether it brought danger or protection, judgment or reward, she would face it. Because she was not just a nurse. She was a mother, and she had just stepped into a storm far more powerful than she could imagine. What began as a random act of kindness in a rainy alley had now pulled Maria Reyes into a world she never belonged to, a world where billionaires bled in silence, and secrets were guarded like fortunes. She didn't ask for this. She didn't want this. But sometimes, the universe rewards kindness not with peace, but with chaos that reveals who we truly are. Maria stood before towering iron gates flanked by security cameras and thick hedges. Behind them lay the Hargrove estate, an ivy-covered mansion with the kind of wealth that only made the news during inheritance battles or Senate investigations. A black SUV had picked her up that morning. No hospital shift, no questions asked, Just a direct summons from Eleanor Hargrove, the billionaire widow whose life Maria had saved, quietly and without recognition. The air was heavy with summer heat, but Maria shivered as the gates creaked open. Inside the estate, marble floors met priceless art. A butler nodded silently and led her through a grand hallway where chandeliers sparkled like stars frozen in crystal. Maria felt her sneakers squeak on the polished surface. She didn't belong here, and yet, something told her she had been expected far longer than she realized. Eleanor Hargrove sat in a sunroom overlooking the manicured garden, her voice softer than it had been in the hospital, yet more commanding. "You look nervous," she said. Maria swallowed. "I don't belong in places like this." Eleanor smiled, just slightly. "Neither do I." They sat across from each other. Maria still wore her plain navy scrubs, Eleanor, a silk robe, and an air of faded elegance. She sipped tea with trembling hands. "You showed me kindness, Maria. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't take pictures. You simply helped. That random act of kindness changed everything." Maria blinked, unsure how to respond. "There's something you need to know," Eleanor said. "The people who tried to kill me weren't after money. They were after silence. I've been keeping something, and it's cost lives." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This was meant for my son, Daniel. But now, I want you to deliver it." "Why me?" "Because you're the only one I trust now." And because trust, she paused, is the rarest currency among the wealthy. Maria took the envelope carefully. It was heavier than it looked. Eleanor leaned forward. "Daniel won't be happy to see you. He believes the attack was staged. He thinks I'm losing my mind. But he must know the truth." Maria nodded slowly. "And what's in this?" "Answers. About a foundation I started. About stolen identities. About how charity was used as a front for something much darker." Maria felt the weight of it. Not just the envelope, but the choice. She was a nurse, a mother, a struggling immigrant doing her best to survive. She didn't have room in her life for the secrets of billionaires. But something about Eleanor's frailty, about her eyes pleading without asking, moved Maria's heart. Kindness had brought her here, and kindness would carry her forward. Hours later, she stood in front of the towering glass office building that housed Daniel Hargrove's corporate headquarters, Hargrove Ventures. The marble lobby buzzed with people in suits, voices crisp with power. Maria walked in, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. She gave her name at the front desk. The receptionist's eyes widened subtly before calling security. 2 guards flanked her, not aggressively, but with that subtle tension reserved for people who don't quite fit in. She was led to the top floor. Daniel Hargrove's office looked more like a private gallery than a workspace. Sleek, cold, powerful. He stood behind a glass desk, tall and chiseled, his jaw as sharp as his reputation for cutting billion-dollar deals without blinking. "You're the nurse," he said, without offering a handshake. "Yes. Your mother asked me to give you this." He took the envelope but didn't open it. "She's alive because of you," he said, but not with warmth. "So let me be clear, if you're expecting a reward for kindness, you won't find it here. I don't believe in fairy tales." Maria squared her shoulders. "I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because someone needed help." Daniel's eyes searched hers, disbelief flickering into something else. Curiosity, maybe, or fear. "She trusts you," he finally said. "That's rare. Too rare." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "One more thing," he said. "If what's in this envelope is what I think it is, your life just became very, very complicated." Maria walked out of the office with her heart racing and her mind spinning. Her random act of kindness had triggered a storm she never saw coming, and the eye of that storm was just beginning to open. Maria's world had shifted overnight. The hospital halls where she once sought refuge now felt like a labyrinth of suspicion and hidden dangers. Every glance, every whisper felt loaded with meaning, an invisible threat stalking her footsteps. The random act of kindness that saved Eleanor Hargrove's life had sparked a chain of events no struggling immigrant nurse could have anticipated. What was once a quiet routine of caring for patients had become a perilous dance on a razor's edge. That evening, as Maria returned home to her small apartment, Andre greeted her with a tired smile. His fever had finally broken. The relief warmed her, but the shadows lurking beyond her door chilled her to the bone. She locked the door behind her and slid the bolt into place. The weight of the envelope Eleanor had given her felt heavier than ever in her pocket. It was a silent reminder that the kindness she'd shown in the alley was no longer just about saving a life. It was about surviving the consequences of that kindness. She sat at the kitchen table, flipping the envelope over and over. Should she open it? Was it safe? The truth inside could destroy lives or save them. Before she could decide, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. Maria's breath caught. This wasn't a warning, it was a threat. The next morning, the hospital greeted her with cold shoulders and colder stares. Laura Simmons, the head nurse who had already doubted her skills, now openly questioned Maria's every move. You're distracted, Laura said sharply as Maria prepared medication. Maybe you should take a leave until this, whatever it is, blows over. Maria clenched her jaw but stayed silent. She was here for her patients, not for gossip. Yet whispers circulated. Rumors that the woman she saved wasn't just anyone, but a billionaire with secrets worth killing for, and that Maria's involvement made her a liability. Her colleagues' skepticism wasn't just about her background as a Filipino nurse. It was about the fear that Maria's kindness had pulled them all into something dangerous. That afternoon, Maria found herself alone in a quiet hallway when a janitor approached her cautiously. I don't know much, he whispered, but be careful. Some folks here don't want you sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Maria nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just a nurse. She was a mother, a protector, and she wouldn't back down. That night, she finally opened the envelope. Inside were documents, evidence that Eleanor Hargrove's charitable foundation was a facade for laundering money tied to criminal enterprises. Names, dates, and transactions carefully recorded. Maria's heart pounded. This was the truth Eleanor wanted her son to know, and why those who attacked Eleanor wanted silence. But with truth came danger. Her phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. Ms. Reyes, a voice said coldly. You should have listened to the warning. Now we're watching. The line went dead. Maria's hands trembled, but she whispered to herself, kindness isn't weakness. It's courage. The next day, Maria went to the hospital administration, demanding protection, not just for herself, but for the patients who trusted her care. The hospital offered little. Laura's disdain remained palpable, but Maria found unexpected allies in a few co-workers who admired her bravery. Together, they decided to expose the truth, even if it meant risking everything. Because sometimes, the greatest reward for kindness is standing up against betrayal and fear. And Maria Reyes was ready to fight. The fluorescent lights in St. Luke's Medical Center flickered overhead as Maria Reyes hurried through the corridors, clutching the incriminating documents tightly in her trembling hands. The sterile smell of antiseptic did little to calm her nerves. Every step she took felt heavier, weighted by the knowledge that her life and the lives of those she cared for were at stake. For a struggling immigrant nurse like Maria, the hospital had always been a battlefield, but now it was a war zone. The random act of kindness that had saved Eleanor Hargrove's life had unleashed a storm of betrayal and danger far beyond her control. As she passed the nurse's station, Laura Simmons's cold gaze pierced her like a dagger. No words were exchanged, but Maria knew the unspoken accusation. You brought this chaos here. Maria had no allies in the hospital administration. They feared scandal more than they cared for justice or protection. But she had something more powerful, a relentless courage fueled by love for her son Andre and the determination to do what was right. Her phone buzzed again, a text from the unknown number. Last chance, Maria. Drop it now, or suffer the consequences. She swallowed the lump rising in her throat but refused to give in. Kindness had been her guiding light, and now it was her armor. Later that night, Maria sat in her tiny apartment, the weight of exhaustion pulling at her. Andre slept soundly in the next room, oblivious to the storm brewing around his mother. Her phone rang sharply. This time, the voice was familiar, Daniel Hargrove. Maria, he said, voice taut with urgency, meet me. Now. We need to talk. Heart pounding, Maria agreed. Minutes later, she found herself in the sleek lobby of Hargrove Ventures, the tension between them palpable. Daniel wasted no time. My mother's enemies are closer than we thought, he said grimly. They've infiltrated the hospital. People who don't want the truth to come out. Maria's breath hitched. The betrayal she'd sensed was real and deadly. You have the evidence, Daniel continued. We need to expose this, but it will put you directly in the crosshairs. Maria's resolve hardened. I won't back down. Together, they planned their next move, leaking the documents to trusted journalists and law enforcement. The reward for kindness was no longer a quiet thank you. It was a fight for survival. Back at the hospital, Maria's life grew more perilous. Anonymous threats appeared on her locker. Equipment was sabotaged. Patients whispered about her hidden agenda. One evening, while charting notes in a quiet ward, Maria sensed a presence. Turning, she found Laura Simmons blocking the door, her expression icy. "You've gone too far," Laura hissed. "You're risking lives for what? Recognition? Money?" Maria met her gaze steadily. "I did it because it was right. Because kindness means standing up, even when it's hard." Laura's eyes narrowed. "You're playing with fire. Watch your back." Before Maria could respond, a sudden blackout plunged the ward into darkness. Panic flared among patients and staff. "Power's out," someone yelled. Maria's phone flashlight cut through the blackness as she rushed to calm a frightened child. The hospital was vulnerable. So was she. Later, in the dim emergency lighting, Maria received a chilling message. "You have 24 hours." Fear surged through her veins, but she refused to succumb. The next day, news broke. An expose revealing the corruption tied to Eleanor Hargrove's foundation. The hospital was thrust into chaos. Administrators scrambled to contain the fallout. Laura Simmons disappeared from sight. Maria's name was both praised and slandered. Some called her a hero, others labeled her a traitor. Through it all, Maria remained focused on Andre, her anchor amid the storm. As federal agents arrived to investigate, Maria knew her life had changed forever. The kindness that saved a billionaire's life had sparked a battle against greed and betrayal, and now she was fighting for justice, for her family, and for the truth. The dawn was barely breaking when Maria Reyes arrived at the hospital, her face pale but resolute. The storm she had weathered was far from over. In fact, it was intensifying, pulling her deeper into a labyrinth of deceit, betrayal, and danger. Her random act of kindness, the very moment she chose to help an injured stranger, had transformed her life into a battleground where every step was shadowed by fear. The hospital corridors, once familiar and safe, now felt like the stage of a high-stakes drama. Cameras from news outlets had swarmed the building, while federal agents worked quietly behind the scenes. For Maria, it was a daily reminder that kindness could come with a price, and sometimes that price was higher than anyone expected. She wasn't just a struggling immigrant nurse anymore. She was a symbol of courage and defiance, a woman refusing to be silenced in the face of overwhelming odds. Maria entered the staff room, where hushed conversations ceased as soon as she appeared. Some nurses offered tentative nods of support, but others kept their distance, wary of being associated with the scandal. Laura Simmons, once her fiercest critic, was nowhere to be seen. Her phone vibrated, another message, but this time from Daniel Hargrove. "Meeting at my office. Urgent." Maria hesitated only a moment before heading to the sleek skyscraper where the Hargrove empire was headquartered. The building gleamed in the morning light, a stark contrast to the turmoil she felt inside. Inside Daniel's office, the tension was palpable. "We're close," Daniel said grimly. "The documents you provided have triggered investigations into the Foundation's illegal activities. But the people behind this are ruthless. They won't stop until they silence everyone involved." Maria's heart pounded. The threat was no longer vague, it was real. "What can I do?" she asked, voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. Daniel looked her in the eyes. "Keep doing what you're doing. Your kindness, your courage has already changed the course of this fight. But you have to be careful. They'll come after you." Maria nodded, steeling herself. Back at the hospital, the atmosphere grew more charged. Patients and staff alike whispered about Maria's bravery, but also about the risks she faced. Anonymous tips to the administration painted her as a liability, while federal agents secured her workplace. One evening, as she prepared to leave, Maria noticed a figure lurking near the parking lot. Her instincts screamed danger. "Maria Reyes," a voice called from the shadows. She turned to see a man in a dark jacket. Before she could react, he lunged. The struggle was brief but fierce. Maria fought with everything she had, fueled by the love for her son and the memory of Eleanor's life she had saved. Help arrived, security guards and police, dragging the attacker away. The hospital tightened security, but the message was clear: Maria's kindness had made her a target. Days later, the court hearings began. The expose had uncovered a web of corruption linking the Hargrove Foundation to illegal schemes, implicating high-profile figures who had tried to bury the truth. Maria testified bravely, her voice unwavering as she recounted the night she found Eleanor bleeding in that alley. Her words were a beacon of hope, not just for justice but for the countless others who faced discrimination and doubt. Outside the courthouse, a crowd gathered, chanting Maria's name. Among them, faces of fellow immigrant nurses, patients, and advocates. Kindness had become a rallying cry. Meanwhile, Eleanor Hargrove recovered steadily, her gratitude for Maria profound. She offered Maria a role in a new, transparent foundation dedicated to genuine care and support for marginalized communities. Maria declined politely but firmly. "I'm a nurse," she said. "My kindness is in the care I give, not in the spotlight." Her life had changed irrevocably, but her mission remained the same: to heal, to nurture, and to protect her son. As the sun set on the trial's final day, Maria stood outside the courthouse, the weight of what she'd endured settling in. She was no longer invisible. She was a hero, a testament to the power of a single random act of kindness. And the reward for that kindness wasn't wealth or fame. It was justice. It was courage. It was the unbreakable spirit of a mother who refused to be broken. The courtroom's echoes had faded, but Maria Reyes' story was just beginning. Months after the trial that exposed corruption buried deep within the Hargrove Foundation and the hospital administration, Maria found herself standing on the cusp of a new life, a life shaped by her courage, fueled by her kindness, and tested by every challenge a struggling immigrant nurse could face. Her random act of kindness, the moment she chose to help a bleeding billionaire in a dim alley, had ignited a series of events that revealed the darkest hospital betrayal, threatened her safety, and yet rewarded her kindness in ways she never imagined. Now, Maria stood in a modest community clinic, far from the sprawling mansions and skyscrapers where secrets had been unraveled. The clinic was humble but filled with warmth, a sanctuary for those often overlooked, a place where Maria's skills, compassion, and relentless spirit could truly shine. Andre, her son, sat beside her, laughing softly as she bandaged a young patient's scraped knee. Maria's heart swelled with pride and gratitude. Despite all the danger, fear, and doubt, she had persevered, not for fame or fortune, but because kindness had always been her true calling. The news outlets had moved on from the scandal, but the impact of Maria's actions lingered. Hospitals across the country began reevaluating how they treated immigrant nurses and frontline workers, inspired by the courage of one woman who refused to be silenced. One afternoon, as Maria prepared for another long shift, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Eleanor Hargrove. "Thank you, Maria. Your kindness saved more than my life, it saved hope." The reward for kindness is sometimes hidden in the lives it touches. Maria smiled softly. Eleanor's words were a reminder that kindness was never wasted, even when the path was dangerous and uncertain. At the clinic, Maria gathered her colleagues, a diverse team of healthcare workers who, like her, had faced struggles but never lost sight of the healing power of kindness. "We're here because we believe in more than medicine," Maria told them. "We believe in courage, in justice, and in the simple truth that every act of kindness, no matter how small, can change a life." Her voice was steady, filled with the quiet strength that had carried her through betrayal and fear. Later, as Maria watched the sun dip below the city skyline, she thought about how far she'd come. From the rainy alley where she saved a billionaire's life, through hospital betrayals and threats that tested her resolve, to this moment, surrounded by a community that valued her for who she truly was. Her journey had shown her that the reward for kindness was not always immediate, nor was it always easy. Sometimes, it meant standing alone against danger. Sometimes, it meant risking everything to uncover the truth. But in the end, kindness was a seed planted in the darkest soil, and it always found a way to grow. Maria Reyes, the struggling immigrant nurse who dared to save a billionaire, was no longer invisible. She was a beacon of hope, a living testament to the power of kindness, courage, and justice. And as she prepared to care for the next patient, she knew her story was not just her own. It was the story of every nurse, every mother, every person who chooses kindness in a world that so desperately needs it. Because kindness, in all its forms, is the greatest reward of all.